Welcome back to AERO 3170, Aviation Safety, Presentation 9 on Textbook Chapter 9 on Airport Design and Safety. Airports in the United States are required to be certified to handle certain types of traffic. And there is a special part of the Federal Aviation Regulations that contain all of the airport certification regulations. And that would be Part 139. Part 139 contains all of the rules and regulations concerning airport certification. One of the regulations in Part 139 concerns aircraft rescue services. The term ARFF means aircraft rescue and firefighting. And these services are based on an index that is determined by the length of the air carrier aircraft and the frequency of departures at a specific airport. The FAA classifies airports under Part 139 as follows. Class 1 airports are scheduled and unscheduled large carrier and unscheduled small carrier airports. So a Class 1 airport can handle scheduled and unscheduled large carriers and unscheduled small carriers. A Class 2 airport can handle scheduled small and unscheduled large carriers. A Class 3 airport can handle scheduled small carriers only. And a Class 4 airport can handle unscheduled large carriers only. And finally, airports that are used by both military and civilian aircraft are known as joint use airports. According to the textbook, how many Part 139 airports existed in the United States as of 2016? And how many were in each class? Well, there were a total of 532 Part 139 airports in the U.S. in September of 2016. 395 of those were Class 1. Only 29 were Class 2, 29 were Class 3, and 79 were Class 4. So out of the 532 Part 139 airports in the United States in September of 2016, 395 could handle scheduled and unscheduled large carriers and unscheduled small carriers. In other words, they were Class 1. There were only 29 airports in the United States classified as Class 2 and Class 3, and 79 of those airports were classified as Class 4 for unscheduled large carriers only. Part 139 of the Federal Aviation Regulations also specifies specific services at airports, and one of those services is known as a specialized airport service. Specialized airport services include aviation fuel handling services, aircraft rescue and firefighting, or ARFF, and aircraft de-icing and anti-icing services. Aircraft fueling is a specialized service that is also very hazardous. Some of the hazards that are associated with aircraft fueling are health hazards to fuelers due to toxic additives in aviation fuel. Because of those toxic additives, aviation fuel can produce toxic fumes. Fuel contaminants, static electricity, sparks produced by other aircraft, and fuel spills are all hazards associated with aircraft fuel handling. Now there are three essential requirements for fuel to burn. Now there are three requirements to get fuel to burn. The first requirement is that the fuel needs to be in a vapor form, so it needs to be vaporized. The second requirement is the ratio between the fuel and the air. You need the right fuel to air ratio with the surrounding atmosphere. And you need a source of ignition or a spark. One of the hazards of fueling operation is static electricity. What steps can be taken to minimize static electricity buildup? Remember, any substance moving through the air is going to produce static electricity because of the friction between that substance and the air molecules. And fuel is no different. There are certain steps that you can take to minimize static electricity buildup when refueling an aircraft. The first one is to follow the proper aircraft grounding procedures. Always ground your aircraft before refueling it. Reduce the fuel flow to decrease that turbulence and that friction between the air and the fuel. And prevent fuel from free-falling through the air into the tank. Again, fuel falling through the air is going to create static electricity. So if you can prevent that fuel from free-falling through the air, you'll minimize static electricity buildup. And avoid pumping contaminated fuel. Any contaminants in the fuel, for example water or debris, is going to increase the static electricity buildup. According to Part 139 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, every airport that's certified under Part 139 that serves air carriers is required to have an airport certification manual. The airport certification manual has all of the regulations and procedures that are required under Part 139, but the most important part of the ACM is the Airport Emergency Plan, which is considered to be an integral part of the ACM. The Airport Emergency Plan is required to be reviewed at least once a year under Part 139, and Class 1 airports are required to conduct a full-scale exercise every 3 years. One of the safety features at some Part 139 airports is known as an EMAS. One of the safety features that you'll find at some Part 139 airports is known as an EMAS. And an EMAS is an Engineered Materials Arrestor System. It's a safety feature at airports that have less than a standard overrun. And it's made of crushable concrete, which is designed to stop an aircraft from overrunning the runway. Again, Part 139 requires an EMAS when an airport doesn't have a standard overrun. So what is a standard overrun? A standard overrun is at least a distance of 1,000 feet. If there's not enough room for a standard overrun, an EMAS can be installed to stop aircraft from running off the end of the runway. Historically, the FAA and ICAO have considered runway incursions to be a major safety issue at airports around the world. But how does the FAA and ICAO define a runway incursion? A runway incursion is any occurrence at an airport that involves an incorrect presence of an aircraft, vehicle, or person on a protected surface, meaning a protected runway, which is designated for landing or takeoff of aircraft. So if there is an aircraft, vehicle, or person on a runway that's designated for landing or takeoff, and that aircraft, vehicle, or person doesn't have permission, that's considered to be a runway incursion. According to the FAA, there are 3 different types or 3 categories of runway incursions. The first category is called an operational incident, and that's due to air traffic control action or inaction. The second category is a pilot deviation. So this is a runway incursion that occurs when a pilot violates a regulation. And the third category is a vehicle or pedestrian deviation. So this is a truck or an automobile or a pedestrian that wanders onto a runway without permission. One of the safety systems that has been installed at some airports in the United States to reduce runway incursions is known as an AMOS. And AMOS stands for Airport Movement Area Safety System. And it provides automatic visual and also audio alerts for controllers when it detects a potential collision or a potential runway incursion. It's been installed at all of the biggest 34 airports in the United States. Another safety feature is known as ASDEX. ASDEX stands for Airport Service Detection Equipment, Model X. And this system is being deployed at the 35 busiest airports in the United States. It provides precise surface detection by using radar, transponder, and ADS-B technology. Other systems that help pilots avoid runway incursions include runway status lights, or RWSL. These are red lights that are embedded in the pavement to signal when there are unsafe conditions on a runway or when a runway is closed. A final approach runway occupancy signal, or FAROS, and these are flashing PAPI lights that signal when a runway is occupied. And finally, electronic flight bags with moving map displays. These moving map displays can show the position of your aircraft on the taxiway. In addition to runway incursions, the FAA considers runway excursions to be a significant safety issue at airports in the United States. The FAA defined a runway excursion in the National Runway Safety Plan of 2015 and 2017. A runway excursion was defined to be a veer-off or an overrun from a runway surface, and it could be associated with both takeoffs and landings. For example, an aircraft taking off from a runway that aborts the takeoff and doesn't stop before the end of the runway is considered to be a runway excursion. In addition, an aircraft that's landing on a runway and doesn't stop before the end of the runway is also considered to be a runway excursion. That's the end of Presentation 9 on airport safety. In the next presentation, we'll cover air traffic safety systems.